From the gridiron to the hardwood, James Mesh breaks it all down. It's time for another episode of Cleats and Sneaks.
We're less than 2 weeks away from the NFL draft, and what a time to be alive, am I right? Welcome back to another edition of Cleats and Sneaks, the podcast where we talk about everything for the NFL and the NBA, and we're getting close to the playoffs as well, but we'll have to wait on that for right now because it's mock draft season, and I have with me the host of the Miguez Mindset and Over Par, Matt Miguez. We're going to do a little special edition here. We're going to do another mock draft, but we're going to do one live right now. I'm going to take half of the picks. He's going to take half of the picks, and we're going to go back and forth and see how do we make up being a couple of different teams in the NFL.
Yeah, and I'm going to start. So the way we're going to do it is James is going to have the even picks. I'm going to have the odd picks. So I get the luxury of starting off number one with the Chicago Bears. And look, it's likely that the Chicago Bears will take Caleb Williams.
Mm-hmm.
But
as expected. I mean, that's pretty much the consensus for the most part.
It is. But we're going to do this as if we were the GMs of these teams. And if I'm the GM of the Chicago Bears, I'm drafting Jaden Daniels number one overall.
Okay.
And quickly, the reason why is, in my opinion, and take it for what it's worth, I feel like everything that Caleb Williams can do, Jaden Daniels can do.
Okay.
And he does some of them better.
That's a completely fair point. I mean, I know with Caleb Williams, you saw a little bit of inconsistency trying to throw the deep ball, but I mean, that's just how it goes. Yep. The farther you throw it down the field, the harder it is to complete that type of pass. But I mean, if that's the case, if Caleb Williams is going to fall to Washington at number 2, I mean, you just have to take him. That's just pretty much the same thing. He's been the number 1 overall prospect in this draft for the last 2 years. It's not like he was the number 1 draft pick or number 1 prospect last year. Even the year before when he won the Heisman, we were all talking about how Caleb Williams was going to go number 1. So if he's going to go number 2 here, I mean, that's just an absolute steal in that sense for the Commanders.
And then at 3 of the New England Patriots, and this one, see, James, this is going to be interesting.
Right.
Because obviously you need a quarterback.
Correct.
But are you in love with Drake May, or does this feel like another Mac Jones situation? Because to me, it feels a lot like another Mac Jones situation.
Well, if you're the New England Patriots, are you in love with Drake May? That's the real question.
I'm not.
You're not? Okay.
I'm not. But they're going to have to do something in terms of a quarterback.
Right, because you only have 1 pick in this first round. So if that's the case, because sure, you could go get yourself a quarterback in the second round. You have the 34th overall pick, but do you really believe that the guy that you really like is going to be there early in the second round? Or even if you trade into the first round, but we're not doing any trades in this mock.
Correct. Look, if I'm the Patriots, I'm holding out hope that a guy like Michael Penix hangs around. So I'm actually going to go out on a limb here and take Marvin Harrison Jr. At 3rd overall.
All right. 2 interesting picks coming from Miguez out of left field. Well, if I'm the Cardinals, I don't really need a quarterback. I still have Kyler Murray. Marvin Harrison Jr. isn't there anymore. Addressed the offensive line a little bit here and there. If that's the case, I like Trey McBride. I'm just going to take the next best available guy. I know it's between Malik Neighbors and Rome Odunze, but if I'm looking for like a specifically an X receiver, I don't need to go there because Michael Wilson, I know he was a late round pick last year, but he showed some signs that he could be that guy. He's a big body wide receiver, so I don't need to go Rome Odunze. Instead, let me go get the speedster out of LSU and go get Malik Neighbors.
Lafayette's own, that is.
Absolutely. Como product as well.
So now we're at pick 5, and that is the Los Angeles Chargers. New head coach Jim Harbaugh. Look, you need weapons for Justin Herbert.
Sure,
there's no question about that. Rome Odunze is a guy that is interesting out of Washington. But one thing I will say is I think that you can get a good receiver later in the draft. And, you look at the Chargers, they have pick 37. I think they could snag a good receiver right there.
Yeah, plenty of depth in that position.
But another big need in the skills department for the Chargers is a tight end.
Yeah.
And who better than Brock Bowers out of Georgia? So if I'm the Chargers, I'm taking him at 5.
That's completely fair. I know they signed a couple of other guys at tight end early on in the offseason, because it feels like maybe they're going to go with a little bit more power, maybe 2 tight ends, or go with at least the I formation a little bit more. But look, getting Brock Bowers, one of the best prospects in the draft at number 5, I don't fault you making that selection. Now, it does make things interesting at number 6. If you've seen any of my previous mock drafts, I've been taking Malik Neighbors there at 6. I was gonna take Brock Bowers there if you weren't going to. Man, if that's the case, if I'm New York, I know you just extended a guy, and I know you have plenty of offensive line help. How about going to get another defensive lineman? How about that? Let's go get Brian Murphy II out of Texas. I know you've gotten plenty of edge rushers. You got Kayvon Thibodeau. You just traded for Brian Burns, but you've already addressed the offensive line a good bit. You could probably go get, like you said, a receiver in the 2nd round. How about going to get a defensive lineman at number 6? I know it's a little high and it's in the interior, but the way everything else has fallen, you can address those other positions later.
So you see now 7 with the Tennessee Titans. I was looking at it and, okay, you have Will Levis, you have Malik Willis. Are you confident in either one of those? I think Will Levis can be a starter in the league in time. Yeah, so I think if you're Tennessee, you just have to give him that time. I think a big part of that as well is giving him protection.
There you go.
So up front, big guy up front, Joe Alt out of Notre Dame. He's the top tackle prospect in this draft, and I think he's a really good fit for the Tennessee Titans.
Yeah, and then for me at 8 with the Atlanta Falcons, I know they've been able to address the defense for the last couple of years, especially last year when they took even a couple of Saints guys, including the co-defensive coordinator as well. But I think they dig into that even more because that defensive line, it's getting a little bit older year by year. I think if you can get a young guy in that room to be a fresh face off the edge to attack opposing quarterbacks and be a disruption in the backfield, I think you go get Dallas Turner, and he's going to be able to fill that role just perfectly.
All right. Well, it was an interesting selection. It's a good pick. I mean, if I'm Atlanta, I'm definitely okay with a guy like Dallas Turner. And now, we're back at 9. Chicago Bears pick again. You obviously just drafted Jaden Daniels, so you don't need a quarterback.
You don't need to go get another quarterback.
You could address the defensive line. Jerzon Newton's a guy that's there out of Illinois. You've also got Jared Versus hanging down there as well. But I am going to pick a skill player.
Okay.
Rome Odunze comes off the board here at number 9 to kind of pair up with Jaden Daniels' little 1-2 combo there in Chicago. I think that's a really good fit for the Bears.
Well, if that's the case, I wanted to try and take another receiver as well because you already brought in another receiver in Keenan Allen for Chicago. It's the same thing with the New York Jets who pick at number 10. They signed a 1-year deal with Mike Williams. Yep. So they've already addressed the wide receiver a little bit, so it's not really a necessity. The Jets, to me, are a prime position to trade down in this draft once we get to draft night in round 1 on April 25th. But if that's the case, there's really not much you need to go for the most part. You could take another edge, and that's where I'm leaning. I'm actually going to go with Jared Verse out of Florida State if that's the case, because you could always use a better rotation when it comes to your defensive line. I know they've addressed that for the most part over the last couple of years, but if you can go get one more guy to do so, I was thinking about getting Drake May there, but do you really need to do that if you've got Aaron Rodgers for the next couple of years?
Correct. Now, at 11, Minnesota, they need a quarterback. Again, not really sold on your situation.
Drake May's still there.
Drake May's still there. I think he's a very good pick at 11 because, look, it's one of those things where he's ranked as the 3rd best prospect in this draft. You get him at 11. So it's one of those things where, if it doesn't work out, kind of splitting hairs at this point. So if I'm the Vikings, I'm taking Drake May out of North Carolina.
And here's the thing with that pick as well, because if you're the Vikings, you also signed a veteran guy who has starting experience in Sam Darnold, and he's on a 1-year deal. So you can have Drake sit for a little while, and if you feel like, okay, let's give him a chance, you throw him out there whenever he's ready. You don't have to put them out there because you don't have anyone else
For
as
sure.
an option. For me, the Denver Broncos at number 12, I'm also going to go in the quarterback direction. I'm going to go with, it's been back and forth between Michael Penix, Bo Nix, and J.J. McCarthy there. But the fact that there has been so much buzz around J.J. McCarthy potentially
Sean
going
loves JJ.
I think J.J. McCarthy, it'd be weird because here's the thing. Former Michigan coach Jim Harbaugh, he was talking about how he should be the first quarterback off the board, and you're always going to hype up your own guys if that's one of your former players.
Yeah.
It'd be funny if Sean Payton tries to be like, let me outbrain you, and let me go get your own guy. I'm going to go with J.J. McCarthy at number 12.
Yeah, that's a smart pick for Denver. 13, the Vegas Raiders. Look, they're a team that has a lot of needs.
Yeah, they have quite a few.
Running back, offensive line, quarterback, defensive line, linebacker, secondary. But the thing is you have 13 picks in this draft. So they can really address some of those big needs. I think they start in the secondary here in round number 1. I'm taking Cooper DeJean, the cornerback out of Iowa.
Okay.
Would love for the Saints to get him at 14. But he's a really good corner that I think could make some fans in Vegas very happy for years to come.
I think that one's very interesting because if you look at the Raiders' history, they tend to like getting SEC guys.
Yeah.
So it feels like Terrion Arnold would be like a
Terrion Arnold,
prime
yeah.
position for them to go there because they usually take defense or some type of skill player, and then they go get the quarterback in the next round. So
Correct.
maybe Michael Penix goes in the second round to the Raiders. But looking at the New Orleans Saints, the black and gold at number 14, offensive line is the big thing here.
Talise.
It's really between Talise Fuaga, Troy Fatanu, and Olu Fashanu out of Penn State.
Yeah.
It really comes down to the 3 Fs.
Yeah.
But for me, I think if you want more versatility, you go get Troy Fatanu. Because here's the thing with that. You're not quite sure what you want to do. It seemed like the Saints still want to go with Trevor Penning as a tackle, and you're still not quite sure what you want to do with that guard position on the left side specifically because you got Cesar Ruiz locked up with that extension just a year ago. So if you want to have that versatility of if you want to put Troy out there at guard, he can kind of do that because he's kind of got that build, at least height and weight-wise, because he's only 6'4" compared to most tackles nowadays. They're between 6'6" and 6'8". So if you want to have that versatility, I say go get Troy Fatanu.
That's a good pick. I'm okay with that. 15, Indianapolis Colts really only have 2 big needs, wide receiver and defensive back. They're going to be a team to watch, James, to trade up. They have 15 picks in this draft.
I do have quite
and they could package a couple of those together and make some noise if they wanted to. But since we're not playing the trade game, staying at 15, look, again, their 2 biggest needs, wide receiver and defensive back. You just brought a guy up in Terrion Arnold from Alabama, a really strong player from the Crimson Tide and Nick Saban's final group at Alabama, 6 foot, 196 pounds, only a redshirt sophomore. The thing that I like about him is that he's still a little rough around the edges.
He's still learning. He's still trying to become better at that position, but he's done it pretty well. If you're at Alabama, you do well.
Correct. And I think that's a perfect position for the Indianapolis Colts, a team that's not quite ready to take the jump. Obviously, they've got good pieces with Anthony Richardson and other young prospects like that. But I think Terrion Arnold's a perfect fit for them as a guy that they can develop into how they want him to play in the future.
And it's completely fair, especially since you're going to have to guard that trio of wide receivers out in Houston.
Yeah.
That's another big thing. You want to counter pick there. That's a smart move by you, Matt. I got the Seattle Seahawks at number 16, and I think they could always use a little bit more edge help. I'm going to go with Laiatu Latu out of UCLA. That's where I've been going for all of my mock drafts. If you want to go check it out on ESPN SouthwestLouisiana.com. Laiatu, he's a little bit limited on his pass rush moves, but the moves that he does have, he's super effective with. So he's always got time to learn more moves as you get into the NFL. So I think Latu at 16 is an excellent pick for Seattle.
For Jacksonville at 17, you need some help on the offensive line. You need some help at edge rusher. Look, if the Saints pass on Talise Fuaga, if I'm Jacksonville, I'm picking him up because he's listed as a tackle, but again, he's like Faltanu. He's very versatile. He's played a lot of snaps at guard in his career at Oregon State. And I think that is a guy that fits the mold of Jacksonville really well. Doug Peterson can get the best out of him.
That's completely fair. And now looking at the Cincinnati Bengals at number 18, a lot of options you could go here. I know that tight end is quote-unquote their biggest need, but they did extend Drew Sample early on in the offseason to a 3-year deal.
You got to protect Joe.
However, really big question mark on what's going to happen at wide receiver with T. Higgins.
Are you going where I think you're going?
I'm going with Brian Thomas at LSU. Another Tiger in Cincinnati. How about that?
All right. I'm still waiting for the news that they trade for Justin Jefferson. I'm still waiting for that to happen.
I just think if you're going to go with Justin Jefferson, if you're the Vikings, why would you trade him away if you're trying to get the next QB that you think is going to be that guy? You need to have one of the premier receivers.
All right, here we go. 19, the Los Angeles Rams. They have 19 picks in this draft, which is wild to think about. But here's to me one of their big need for their picks in the top 100. But here's to me their biggest need. Matthew Stafford is not getting any younger.
No, he's not. He is not.
It is time to find a replacement, and it is time for you to get somebody in the locker room that he can groom for a year, maybe 2. I'm going with Bo Nix.
Going Bo Nix at 19.
I think that's a great fit for Sean McVay's offense. I think he could run Sean McVay's offense really well, and I think Matthew Stafford's a great guy to develop him for the first year or so of his career.
I'm actually really surprised you didn't try and go with the defensive lineman, Jerjon Newton, because we had seen Aaron Donald retire early on the offseason, so maybe you go get his replacement. But hey, if you can go from Matthew Stafford to having Bo Nix work out for you,
correct.
Never a bad idea. I mean, we saw how fast Houston turned around with C.J. Stroud. At pick 20, I'm looking at the Pittsburgh Steelers, and you look at their history, they tend to like to go offense. Surprising with how good their defense is, they like to go offense in the first round generally, and they could use another tackle. Who's still available? That's right, Olu Fashanu. Let's shore up that tackle position just a little bit more. I mean, he was one of the best guys, and I know if you look at quite a few mock drafts, he's going a little bit higher, and we've seen the Saints even take them in a couple of mock drafts. But out there at 20, that feels like a steal for the most part if you're the Steelers.
Yeah, I agree. That's a great pick there for the Pittsburgh Steelers. 21, the Miami Dolphins. Look, tight ends in need, but there's none really near the top of the board right now.
You can get one later.
That would be a great fit for them. Offensive line is another big need. Obviously, you want to protect Tua Tagovailoa as much as possible. Sorry, I butchered that. J.C. Latham's still on the board, and I think that at this point that's a no-brainer for the Miami Dolphins. He's a strong offensive tackle that could probably, I don't know how many games he's played at guard, if at all. I'm sure he could probably be versatile for the Miami Dolphins and Mike McDaniel. So J.C. Latham out of Alabama, you are a Miami Dolphin.
Absolutely, that's pretty fair. And usually with the Eagles, they're also really big on getting SEC guys, and I'm looking at them for the most part. The fact that Kool-Aid is still there, I feel like your Slay is not getting any younger, and I know they re-signed a couple of guys, and the cornerback room doesn't look all that bad right now. But if I'm looking at what's available right now, I just got to take Kool-Aid McKinstry and try and shore up that secondary a little bit more because they just extended Jordan Mailata, and they still have Lane Johnson at tackle. So it really doesn't make sense to try and go get someone like Amarius Mims at the moment.
Correct.
Why not go in a different direction? Maybe you could do a little bit of moving around. Maybe you move Avonte Maddox out to safety if you really need him to be a little bit more versatile.
Now, Minnesota Vikings at 23. Obviously, you drafted Drake May earlier on in the draft. Defensive back is another need for them. Quinyon Mitchell out of Toledo. Small school guy, but a really smart defensive back. He's played well most of his career. A little undersized at 6 foot 196. But look, he's on the big board. He's ranked 10th by PFF. You can get him at 23rd. That's a steal.
Yeah,
so I'm going with Mitchell out of Toledo.
And here's the thing with cornerbacks. I mean, we've seen plenty of guys be 5'9", 5'10", and even a couple. I think there's been every once in a while one where he's 5'8", and they've been relatively skinny. So the fact that you can get a 6 foot cornerback that has the grade that we've seen for him, I feel like that's an absolute steal at 23. It kind of reminds me of what happened with the Saints back in 2017 when they got Marshall and Lattimore at 11 out of Ohio State. Looking at the Dallas Cowboys, number 24. That's their pick right now, and there's quite a few different directions you could go with them. But the fact that you just moved on from Leighton Vander Esch, and you only really have Micah Parsons, and now there's rumors that Micah Parsons is he's not a cancer in the locker room, but it sounds like a lot of guys would be much happier if they moved on from him. If you're going to get even more thin, you need to shore up that linebacker room. Go get yourself Peyton Wilson out of NC State, one of the best graded linebackers. He is the best linebacker in this class when you look at PFF rankings. And if you can go get him, I feel like in the late first round, it's a good pick.
Green Bay at 25.
A lot of directions you can
go.
Which,
by the way, let me just say this. I'm looking, we're doing this through PFF, and up at the top it says remaining picks. I'm sitting here thinking that they have 25 picks in the draft. But that's what picks they have remaining in the first round. So when I said they have 19, 20, however many picks, disregard that because that information was very much incorrect. But anyways, 25, Green Bay Packers. You need defensive line help. You need offensive line help too.
Yeah, you moved on from David Bakhtiari.
But look, Amarius Mims, I think he's a good player.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm the Packers and the draft goes this way, I'm looking at the board and going, how is Jerzon Newton still on the board? He's ranked 8 on the big board. He's got an ADP of 22.5. It's one of those situations where no matter who you're eyeing, a guy like that's still on the board, I think you have to take him.
Yeah, and that's a completely fair pick. Looking at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I know they've re-signed a lot of guys over the offseason. They're pretty much bringing the band back together, made a couple of signings outside of the organization, but for the most part, the really big need, in my opinion, is cornerback. I mean, they did just trade one to the Detroit Lions, and if that's the case, let me go ahead and take Nate Wiggins out of Clemson. I mean, let's stir up that position a little bit more. Nate's looked pretty good so far. Overall, he's 6'2", 185, pretty skinny, but here's the thing. It's the same thing with Jaden Daniels and the critique of guys being skinnier than others. You're going to grow into it as you get older, and you bulk up once you get into league. So to me, that's not a big issue, but a big guy at 6'2", that's going to be tough.
27, the Arizona Cardinals get this pick from the Houston Texans. Look, when you've got a big play quarterback like Kyler Murray,
right, he
needs big play receivers. And you have Rondale Moore, which is a really strong pick. And I know you went draft Malik Neighbors earlier in the draft.
Yeah.
But I'm almost tempted to just go ahead and take another one. So
you're going to double down.
I think I'm going to double down.
Oh my!
So if I'm the Cardinals,
there's still a lot of options out there.
I'm eyeballing A.D. Mitchell.
You're looking at A.D. Mitchell out of Texas.
I mean, he's a guy that even before his time at Texas, when he was at Georgia, so his time at Georgia into his time at Texas, he caught a touchdown pass in 4 straight college football playoff games. He is a big play receiver. I think he's a great fit in Kyler Murray's offense with Malik Neighbors. They can tag team together, and then Rondale Moore can kind of be your secret weapon, if you will. Give me A.D. Mitchell for the Cardinals.
And then also, I mean, just the spotlight isn't too big for him. So, I mean, if that's the case, once you get into the NFL, I don't know how many Arizona Cardinals games this year are going to be in prime time. But once we get there, I don't think you have to worry about that. Looking at the Buffalo Bills at number 28, we're trying to wrap up these last couple of picks. Buffalo, they got rid of a lot of guys over the offseason. And I think the one that you really need to worry about is safety because you moved on from a couple of big-time guys. I know you moved on from Tre'Davious White as well. But here's the thing. Tyler Nubin out of Minnesota, that's one guy that I feel like even though safety has been a little bit diminished over the last couple of off seasons, we've seen it's the same thing with running backs. It's not really a position that you go for in the first round anymore.
Certainly.
But if it's the end of first round, it's almost like having an early second.
It's an early second.
And so you can take some more shots and just go get a guy that you feel like is going to be a difference maker. So getting Tyler Nubin out of Minnesota feels like a need that you can fill right there.
Detroit at 29, look, you need a center. And I think that's one position that you can't really risk, right? So I really like Jackson Powers Johnson out of Oregon. He's a guy that has a really strong blocking grade. He's got a run blocking grade of 85.6 a pass block grade of 90.6. His lowest grade in college was a 70 his freshman year.
Right, and since then he's looked a lot better.
It's jumped up to 84 and 85 since then. So look, I think he's a guy that has really grown into his position and can be an immediate help for the Detroit Lions. So I'm going Jackson Powers Johnson out of Oregon.
Looking at the Baltimore Ravens, it's not like there's a lot of big needs, but one thing that I do notice is Baltimore is really keen on having a lot of good secondary players. And they did move on from a couple over the offseason. We've seen quite a few corners go off the board, but I feel like it would just be ridiculous if we didn't see at least a couple of defending champs players, the Michigan Wolverines, go in the first round. So I'm going to take Mike Sainstrill out of Michigan to help fill up that cornerback position just a little bit better. I know they still have a lot of key guys in that secondary, but getting a little bit more depth there will be key.
31, the San Francisco 49ers, the Super Bowl runner-up from this past year. Look, you need corners, but I think that this draft is pretty deep in corners. Kamari Lassiter is one guy that comes to mind. You've got guys from Missouri. There's a couple of Missouri defensive backs in this draft. So look, there's time for you to get that. When you look at the board, the top four guys right now are all offensive linemen: Amarius Mims, Graham Barton, Tyler Guyton, and Zach Frazier. And I'm looking at Tyler Guyton from Oklahoma, a really strong offensive tackle, really well built as well at 6'7", 327 pounds. He's considered a rare athlete by Pro Football Focus. So I think that's a good fit for the San Francisco 49ers as they look to return to the Super Bowl in 2024.
Tyler Guyton at 31 to the 49ers. And to round out the first round, Kansas City Chiefs. You're tempted to take a wide receiver here, especially since what happened with Rashee Rice off the field. You did get Hollywood Brown, though, so I don't know how much of a need that is.
True. That's true.
And also the build of guys that you have left on the board. I'm not the biggest fan of Troy Franklin. But one thing that I do notice is the fact that Amarius Mims has still not been taken. And sure, you have a little bit of line help right now on the tackle if you're Kansas City, but you got to draft for the future. You got to take some shots and make sure that you're able to secure the positions, especially the high-end ones at tackle. That way, Patrick Mahomes, he stays upright and has time to deliver to Travis Kelce and whoever in the future.
Certainly.
So I'm going to take Amarius Mims to round up our number one, or wrap up round one of the 2024 NFL Draft. Mesh's Mock Draft 5.0, featuring Matt Miguez, the host of the Miguez Mindset, and Over Par. Appreciate you coming on.
Oh, James, appreciate you having me, buddy.
Oh, this was awesome. I think this was a nice little bit of a change-up. You'll be able to check out the full list and our reasoning behind our picks on ESPN-SouthwestLouisiana.com. Appreciate you tuning in to another edition. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel ESPN Southwest Louisiana, and also turn on the notification bell. That way you get notified each time we upload any one of our podcasts, not just this one, not just this, guys, but we also got the Four Tire Change podcast with Dawson Islow and plenty of other local content. Of course, LSU Tigers, Houston Astros. They're not looking the greatest right now, but we cover them. New Orleans Saints, the Louisiana Raging Cajuns, and even the McNeese Cowboys, and so much more. Appreciate you tuning in. Talk to you next week.